Hey there, Debbie Z. Lattuga with another episode of the Business Bridge to Breakthrough podcast. Really excited today because I'm fascinated with the human brain, and I'm here with Neeli Clute, and she's with Agile Intellect. And what her a special gift is, and her expertise is really working with the corporate audience and helping them kind of navigate the pace of what their everyday life entails, right? And I love it that she blends neuroscience with the practicality of how do we work with our brains to navigate the environment that we're in. So welcome to the show, Neeli. It's so great to have you.
Thank you for having me, Debbie.
Hey, so was that a good description? I'd love for you, in your words, to share with what you do and how you help people.
I absolutely love that, actually. I guess you could define me as a brain health strategist or a neuro leadership speaker. I speak to a lot of corporate audiences internationally who are coming to me saying, we have got to support our people because there's burnout and brain fog and all sorts of mental health issues that are popping up. People are exhausted, they're not sleeping. And it really does affect performance in the workplace, personally, as well as working within teams.
Yeah.
So, what is it that we can do in this very quickly evolving environment to support our focus, our productivity, and our mental health and our cognitive abilities? Because as you know, we're working in a world that is mostly knowledge workers now. So you need to use this capability under this hood
Yeah.
and the best you possibly can. So I
Yeah.
speak to them about that.
And what I love about that is the echo that I'm hearing from the business community, which is how do we help our employees? It is so much easier to support the employees you have than it is to go find new ones, right? If they're not getting the support they need. And I'm seeing this in healthcare, right? With the difficulties that doctors and nurses have with kind of that on the job stress that they're experiencing. And if you as an organization can create an environment where your people feel supported in that specific thing of, the pace of the work or the navigation of the work or the growth of the company or how quickly we were talking about adaptability before we started the call, like how quickly people have to adapt, and you're able to support your business with strategies that help the employee, you become a magnet for the best talent, right? Because people know that when they come and they work with you, they're going to get that emotional support or that strategic support, which, by the way, not only helps you at work, but helps you at home, right? It helps you have a richer quality of life. It makes you more productive at work. It makes you well rested, and it makes your home life more peaceful. So just out of curiosity, like, how did you come to this work? Like, what caused you? I always like to say, like, when you were sitting at that kitchen table the day you decided to launch your business, like, what led you to that point, and what made you passionate about saying this is the road that I want to take?
I trained for a job that didn't exist yet. And that's what we're often having to do now with all of these changes. I found something I was absolutely passionate and so curious about, which was the brain, and
Hmm.
I got a degree in neuroscience. The typical path is to go to medical school and become a doctor. And I had a mentor at the time who I really am grateful to because he was a surgeon. And he said to me, if you were my daughter, I wouldn't want you going into medicine. And I was highly confused by that.
Yeah.
So I said, what do you mean? This is your own profession. He said, go work in a hospital and find out. So I did. And I found out exactly what he was talking about in terms of my strengths and weaknesses, as well as just the lifestyle that I had in front of me. I had a vision of what it was going to be like. The reality was quite different.
Right.
So I ended up also getting curious again and then pursuing something else that was I really loved, which was working with the children in the children's hospital. So I got a degree in education, which is a brand new field, neuroscience and education. And I recognize as you move through things, you start to see the gaps. You start to see what leads your curiosity. And I recognized we knew a whole lot about the brain we weren't using in the classroom, which is
Right.
where it should be primarily, right? So, in bridging neuroscience and education, I got mind, brain, and teaching at Johns Hopkins, where they had started to recognize that and started helping teachers design curriculum that works with the brain we got. What I came to understand based on how things are changing so quickly is that adults have not learned these things either. And when I became familiar with a very powerful framework of 21st century skills that we need to thrive in the 21st century, the framework was wonderful. It was a $30 million program that was based in intense research and 15,000 CEOs' feedback, 60 industries, 33 countries.
Wow.
It was powerful, except it was the what, not the how. So I started pursuing how do you achieve these things? How do you learn those skills? How do you support those cognitive realms that you need to be able to thrive in this crazy volatile environment? And that's when I founded Agile Intellect and started working with the primary classroom, which is the parents that were working in corporate and having to go home to
Yeah.
children after being completely fried all day.
Right. And then not having any reserves as a parent, not having any reserves when you come home, right?
That's
Because
right.
it's all been left at the office. I remember when my kids were small and I had gone back to work, and I had been blessed to be an at home mom for quite some time. And when the very first day of my very first back in the workforce, I came home and I said to my husband, I'm so sorry I asked you to talk to me when you came home from work, because my amount of depletion at this particular moment means I have no reserves for communicating, right? And obviously we work through strategies on how to fix that, but I just recognized that, I was starved for adult interaction when he came home, and realized how depleted he must be.
Yeah.
So we came
Our
up with
mental
strategies on
bandwidth
on
is really stretched right now.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's the work I do,
yeah,
is helping to broaden that mental bandwidth in very healthy ways because we have another epidemic coming that we're not paying attention to, which is Alzheimer's and dementia. It's supposed to
right,
triple by 2050. And
yeah,
what we do now matters for that later.
yeah,
So it's not
yeah.
just productivity now, it's beefing up your brain bank for the prevention of Alzheimer's, which is largely preventative, even if you have genetic predisposition for it.
I'm starting to see some of those things filter out into the news media about the preventable things that you can do.
Yeah.
Certainly, figuring out how your brain works and being able to, whether you're increasing your capacity to deal with stress, but being able to maximize your brain capacity in a younger years certainly can contribute to lifelong brain health, right? Which is something
Absolutely.
that
Yeah,
you're talking
that's
about.
the best evidence we have right now of what works. There
Yeah,
aren't drugs that aren't working well. There's a lot of research being done, but the absolute best way to approach it is through lifestyle because that starts developing decades before symptoms occur.
right, right. So let me ask you, because it sounds like you had a couple of roadblocks on your journey to this business,
Mhm.
but can you think of a challenge that kind of stands out for you? And I'm talking about now in the growth of your business. What
Mhm.
was a challenge that stood out with you for you during this journey, and how did you overcome it?
I think the biggest challenge was people didn't understand what the heck I did.
Right.
Not sure what a neuroeducator or neuro leadership speaker is. What does that mean? And when you're on the cutting edge of a brand new field that's coming out, trying to, for example, explain Bitcoin to someone who's never heard of it. Now I'm
Or
an expert,
AI to
or
someone who's
AI.
never, yeah, yeah,
That was a challenge, trying to explain in everyday terms what exactly it was that I did do and how it was that I could be helpful to
yeah,
them. So it has started to develop to where people have a better understanding and concern for mental health because it has been when COVID hit, that was a really tough thing with all the uncertainty that's happening, the polarization that's happening, the stress levels, just the rapid changes in technology. It's a lot to keep up with. And we feel often like we're walking around with broken brain syndrome.
yeah,
How can I function in this environment where there's so much coming at me and I can't think straight, where I've got 5 million distractions, or I've simply got too much on my plate?
yeah,
How do I deal with the brain fog and the X and Y and Z? But once you understand the basics of how it works and what to do to support it, it makes it a whole lot easier to implement successful strategies.
yeah. So how would you say that you navigated that challenge of people not really understanding what a brain researcher or a neuroscientist does? How do you think, I see some contributing factors. Day two of the pandemic, I said, our need for mental health support is going to skyrocket because people that felt well grounded prior to the pandemic are now thrown into uncertainty. And I could just see the need for people that may in the past not have sought the help of mental health with this. You wake up with uncertainty in the morning. It's like a jar, right? You have a certain amount of capacity in mental capacity in a day. And if you wake up with uncertainty every morning, part of that capacity is just already used, right? Because you're waking up with that. So I instantly saw that we were going to have a mental health shortage, that people that in the past that may have never seen themselves seeking mental health support were going to gravitate towards that. So how did you navigate that as people didn't really understand what you did? How did you figure out a pathway through, around, over that challenge?
A lot of networking helped,
Hmm.
getting out there and having conversations with HR departments, with um, the people that were suffering from some of these things, that
Hmm.
were having difficulty with the brain fog and the burnout and the attrition. The people were having to do the job of 2 and 3 and 4 people sometimes when everyone was bailing out in a toxic environment.
Yeah.
So, and then I also am a contracted speaker for a wellness company that is their focus, and they do a lot of the legwork for me, where they go out and they work and talk with CEOs and leadership that are interested in supporting their workers, because they recognize it's a really good financial strategy for the company, because
Right.
it's expensive to have to burn through people constantly and retrain them constantly, and started understanding that being the best place to work in the country for your field was a really good investment.
Right. Right.
So,
This company's doing it differently because they're supporting their workers. And when you work there, you're able to feel that support. So where do you see your business in the next 3 to 5 years, and what are you most excited about?
well, I'm really excited about branching out. I really love talking to these corporate environments or these audiences, but I often only see them several times. I don't get to develop a community where we can make ongoing progress because it's not a easy thing to do, like learning a particular type of code. It is something that is evolving constantly. It is something that you can go really deep into. So I am creating some programs for, particularly for women that are in the sandwich between perhaps adolescent children and aging parents with dementia that feel like they're losing their minds.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Because
sure.
often, this is women who are going through menopause, which often gives you difficulty with word retrieval, memory. There's a big shift that's happening cognitively during menopause and adolescence and pregnancy brain that if you have an understanding of, you can find ways to manage.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to building a community that I can work, watch, and foster over time in several programs that I'm going to be releasing. I'm working on one right now that
Yeah.
should hopefully be ready to launch by, I'm hoping ready to launch by May, but we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
So what roadblocks or challenges do you see in executing that vision?
The most of them I have started to slay, but it's building the right team, having a group of people that can specialize in all of the things that solopreneurs often have to do on their own. I recognize that I have my own mental bandwidth limits and specialty, and I want to be able to focus on what my genius zone is in.
Yeah.
And so I built a team that's going to help build all of those things that are experts in social media, that are experts in the technology that gets put in behind the scenes, that are experts in helping create the niche so I can tailor it to that particular group of people. And also all of the campaigns, the emails from start to finish. I've got a team in place that's going to help me get through that part.
Yeah.
So I can focus on the juicy stuff that I
Yeah. I often find, I work with small business owners and I find that they're so used to solving all their problems themselves, all their challenges themselves, that it doesn't often occur to them that they may be able to find, you might not need to hire a full-time assistant, but you might want to hire a social media expert to be able to navigate that part of your business. You might find someone to help you answer emails, not that they're answering on your behalf, but they're understanding which ones are kind of simple ones to answer and which ones might need a more thorough response. And they're just, even though they have a company and they have people that work for them, their brains are solopreneur brains. This is
yes.
a problem that I have to solve. And so I love that your instant recognition, probably because of your neuroscience background, is that we all have a zone of genius. And what you also recognize is that asking for help or finding someone that can support you in the ways that, although you could do all the social media, why would you, or why would you not then go find someone who's an expert?
Just because I can doesn't mean I should. And I had
That's
to
such
really
a,
embrace that and step away from that superhero persona as I can do all be all, to a more collaborative approach that honors my own mental health because I'm on this journey too. I've
yeah,
had to really fight a lot of those tendencies to try and do it all, be all.
yeah.
That's one
And
thing I
that's
love about Richard Branson. He does that.
right.
He loves the creative genius part and then he hands it off to people that are really good at it.
Well, he's often said that because of his dyslexia and his inability to read reports, he
Mhm.
had to find his own way to do the creative research needed in order to decide about purchasing a company where 98% of his colleagues are reading the reports. And what he discovered, because he had to do it a different way, learned how to work with his brain, he did a different way. He had a humanistic approach to talking to the leaders of the company and talking to the people that are in the organization. Some would argue that he may have discovered a better path
Oh,
to discovering a profitable company or a potential of a company, that the numbers didn't tell, right? So he's been pretty successful in buying companies without using what everyone else believed. He learned how to work with his brain
that's right.
and
And
didn't
you
allow
need to
that
be
to.
able to understand that all of these brains are different. And there are amazing geniuses out there that don't have a job.
Right.
A lot
Well,
of
and
them are diverse too.
I think though, the average person looks at that brain of dyslexia as broken
It's not broken. It's
instead
different.
of
Yes.
you have a different expertise. And for Richard Branson, it actually worked out pretty well because he found a different way that everyone else did it this way. And he's like, well, I can't do it that way. Jim Quick, similar, right? He
Yes.
had a brain injury as a child
Yep.
and was told his whole life that his brain was broken and that he would never be able to learn. And by some dumb reason, he didn't believe them.
James Clear is another
And
example of a person who did that, who wrote
yeah,
Atomic Habits.
yeah, James Clear. Yeah,
James Clear also had a head injury from baseball
yeah.
that he had to overcome. But what's really fascinating is that it's starting to be recognized in a lot of tech companies that it's a talent acquisition strategy to use neurodiverse brains.
It's like Moneyball for sports, but in the business world, that when
Right.
people think differently, right? Having people that think differently and approach problems differently, instead of a homogeneous leadership team, you have a leadership team that all thinks differently and attacks problem differently. You
Right.
actually can run faster because you come up with creative solutions. My
Yeah.
children both went to art school, and very brilliantly, the first art school that my eldest applied to sent a book to me, to the parents of, and it was Daniel Pink's A Whole New Mind,
Oh,
why the BFA
yeah.
is the new MBA, because they're finding that people that think creatively actually become fast problem solvers in an environment where things are changing all the time. And people that think creatively can often speak to the engineers and the product designers. They actually have the ability to communicate with both, so that now people were, and that was like, I recognized what was happening. I'm like, oh, you guys are genius. Like,
Well,
because I
the
read that
it
book and I was
is
afraid
creating
that
the
my
team.
children were going to art school, that maybe that might not be the best
You
pathway.
don't make any money in art,
And
right?
after that, I was like trying to talk my second one into going to art school. Like, you need to go to art school. I know you want to go to you should think about going to art school, because I saw the genius of it, right? That our society, they actually have the blended brain that can think creatively but also strategically, right? And that companies would benefit by the way, my daughter's 32 years old. When she graduated school 10 years ago, she had about 2 dozen friends that she graduated simultaneously that I was aware of. 100% of them had jobs within 6 weeks paying more than $50,000 a year. 100%. 100% employable within 6 weeks. All of them are now.
It's going to be you can't just throw new hires or people into a wilderness.
Right.
You have to have a business that specializes in creating really integrated teams where you have a mix of, if you look at a neurodivergent IQ profile, for example, they will have a genius level that is way up here, but also weaknesses way down here, way low. Whereas somebody who is more neurotypical is going to have an IQ profile that is within 1 or 2 standard deviations. But if you put somebody who's really strong in this and expect them to do things that they're really weak at, which is often executive function kinds of things, sticking to a timeline and certain things like that, it's going to be a catastrophic failure.
Right.
So it's a matter of having a diverse team working together, supporting, having strengths and having support for weaknesses in a blend of divergent and natural minds, because
Yeah.
that's really what works incredibly well. And it's one of the most successful talent acquisition strategies out there for SAP, for I think Microsoft is starting to do that. Ford, there's a lot of different companies that have recognized just the ROI
Yeah.
on that kind of thing. But it has
Wow.
to be done carefully. You can't just throw people into the wilderness and hope it works.
Right, because if you think about, for instance, people in the artistic field are usually fairly more challenged in navigating time, right? That's not a strong suit because they're creative. So having someone, and in fact, the companies that my daughters work for have very often tolerate that from their creative teams, missing
You have
deadlines.
to, because that's the
Because
way
they
that
have
works.
to,
Right.
right? To have that creative genius, you have to tolerate that. I believe that my daughter's probably a little
Or
bit more,
support it, maybe better. So,
well, my daughter's a little bit more neurotypical. I'm not saying that she might not have some diverse neurodiversity, but she's more neurotypical. So guess who's really good at timelining her team? Her. Because she recognizes that they're not normally good at that. So she's got these strategic check-ins along the way instead of saying this is due by Friday, and then on Friday it's not there, and she's like, "Well, now she's got to scramble and communicate to the rest of the teams that this isn't happen." She's checking in on Monday saying, "Hey, are you on track for Friday?" "Yep, looks like we are." "Okay, if you have any challenges, let me know." Then saying, benchmarking the
yeah.
Wednesday, what needs to be done by Wednesday so that it can be done by Friday. She's an amazing facilitator. Her projects all come in on time. Nobody can understand how she can do that.
Because she's
But
a genius in project management.
well, because when
Organization.
she went to college and she had to turn projects in because the professors knew they're working with people tend to be neurodivergent. The professors were like, "Okay, we need we need the title of what you're going to work on and the materials and your vision. We need that, week 1. Week 2, we need a sketched out prototype." So they timeline these artists
Got to break it down.
so that they can work through that project strategically. So the professors all knew how to do that. But what that did in my more neurotypical child was teach her how to timeline the people that she works with in getting these little projects, because she had to do it in college. She was able to then translate that in doing it with her team, right? So you
Another thing, the
probably know
benefit
about,
of doing it that way is that when you complete something, your brain gets excited and happy, and you have a little dopamine rush. So the more you can break down your project, it feels like completions.
right.
And that creates a really positive environment for you,
Yeah. Yeah.
mental environment.
So
Yeah.
so how do you balance working in your business versus working on your business? Because I hear this from business owners all the time, like, I'm too busy doing the work to
Yeah.
work on the plan.
Well, I think that's counterproductive. I think you need to flip the script when it comes to that and put the big rocks in first. You cannot throw spaghetti at a wall and hope it sticks and see what sticks. You need to have a better plan and so that you can prioritize things, because your brain is an organ that likes to categorize things. And to be able to have a structure where you have a priorities is really, really, really crucial to succeeding. So to have a structure, and this is one of the biggest reasons, is that your brain works a lot on autopilot for brain budgeting reasons, because it takes a lot of energy to keep this going up here.
Yeah.
And so one of the strategies your brain automatically does is using autopilot. So the more things that you can create those structures when you're working on in your company, such that Mondays are CEO days, Tuesdays are marketing, Wednesdays are outreach, and Fridays might be finance, and then break those down so that you are chunking those. There's all sorts of strategies that are brain friendly, that
Yeah.
are really helpful, that I try to utilize myself so that I'm not overwhelmed 24/7. I'm not throwing myself under the bus, because it doesn't work.
Right.
We
Right.
keep trying to make that work and pretend that time is infinite, and it isn't.
Yeah.
It
I
just isn't.
love the big rock. So I'll interpret that for those that haven't heard that term. So big rocks is if you need to make financial decisions and marketing decisions and other decisions every week, how do you schedule those hours on your calendar, the big rocks, to be able to work on those things? I have quite a few business owners that schedule 2 or 3 hours Sunday night. That's the plan for the week. They have a home environment that allows for that, where they can go from, 7 to 10 on Sunday night, and they can sit down and they can either work on their business during that time, or get the week scheduled so that the important things get done and they don't get bypassed. It's about putting those big rocks in first, because if you say, I hope to talk about finance on Monday, but you don't have it scheduled on your calendar, you
It's
get to
gonna
the end of the day and you're like, "Ugh." And you might have it scheduled and it still might get bypassed, but at least you're being strategic on recognizing that it's an important thing that needs to get scheduled. Then you might decide we need to schedule it for 7 a.m. on Monday so that we make sure it happens, right? We
I
can't
think a really important thing to include in that is that you also have to structure your free time. Not
That's
just
a big rock. That
Yeah.
actually should go on your calendar first,
Yes.
right?
Yes. In fact, that's kind of how I approach it now. I used to be self-sacrificing Sally that would throw myself under the bus and then burn out. Now I have flipped that around. I put my vacations in first. I put my free time in first. I put my health in first, because without health, you have no wealth.
Right.
Nothing else matters.
It's true.
You
That's true.
really, and I can't tell you how many people I hear have hit the wall hard and been in hospital beds with their laptop, trying to continue answering the emails and so on.
Right.
And that just does not work.
Right. Right. So as we wind this up here, what's one piece of advice you would offer someone who's struggling to take their business to the next level, other than address your brain health? Because that will help you do that. Because we know that, right? We've heard that. We agree. That is something that hopefully all the listeners will take some steps to nurture in themselves. But someone that's looking to get their business to the next level and struggling to do that, what advice would you give to them?
I would tell them to dream big. And when I mean that, I mean get really good sleep and get creative first thing in the morning with the journal or some way that you can really think about what your passions are and what it is that you really want your life to look like and what you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then you have a fun thing called the default mode network in your brain. Once you set that goal, that will help you figure out the steps to get there. But you got to give yourself time to really think it out And when you write it down, it's one of my favorite ways. Not everybody loves to do that. You can do it, on audio as well. But when you put it down on paper, you'll be shocked after all the problem solving and things that happens in deep sleep and REM sleep, what will come up first thing in the morning. Give yourself me time in the morning to sit and dream about what that looks like.
Yeah.
And you'll be shocked at what comes up.
I love the vision. And in order to get where you want to go, you have to know where you're going. But in order to know where you're going, you have to know what you want.
That's
Right. And sometimes business growth is the goal. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's an enough point, right? What do you want your life to look like? How does the business support that? And now that you know where you're going, the brain is a problem-solving machine. So now you've given it a task, and your unconscious will start to work towards that. I love that recommendation. So where can people find you? So if people are listening to this and like, oh my gosh, she's amazing, I really want to connect with Neeli in a more purposeful way. Where should we send them?
Come to LinkedIn and look for the Brain Boss newsletter. Subscribe to it. I generally have tips on how to support your brain health and your productivity and your success weekly on that. Subscribe, DM me. I would love to have a conversation. You can have a virtual coffee with me if you have further questions, but I love meeting new people. I'm very curious about all of the evolutions that are happening all around us. It's pretty exciting to watch. And I know for some people it can be a little frightening, but with AI happening, with just all of the changes that are happening exponentially fast,
Yeah.
I think it's just fascinating to see how people are innovating. So reach
Yeah.
out. I'd love to connect.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for being here. This has been another episode of Business Bridge to Breakthrough podcast. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also catch us on YouTube, where you'll be able to get the video version of this podcast. So thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Neeli.